Glad to have you all here at Spring Showcase. We've got a special guest today, Mike Gunton, executive producer, Prehistoric Planet. Mike, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Nice to be here. Looking forward to it.
I know. I mean, it's the two or maybe the three of us here today. You've got a special friend behind you.
Goes everywhere with me.
Love it. I mean, I love the project. It's funny with these huge spanning things. Um, how does something like this come into play? What's the spark? Because it's more than like we're going to another locale, and it has a lot of moving parts, moving pieces, and it's really a broad idea.
Yeah.
Can you just take us back to
Well, funny enough, yes. I mean, funny enough, you're absolutely right. Is these things do come from inevitably, there has to be a little spark somewhere. And interestingly, this comes from being with him, Sir David, on a mountainside in Africa, doing the introduction to a series we were making about Africa. And he was standing on the mountainside in Samburu saying, nowhere on the earth does wildlife put on a greater show. That was the kind of thing we were talking about Africa. And I'm, I was directing and said, yep, that's great. And I was, as we were sort of packing, I was thinking, that's true for today, but I wonder if it's always been the case. When would it, if I could choose any time, when would be the time when when wildlife would put on truly the greatest show? I thought, probably when the dinosaurs were walking past here. And I sort of thought, I wonder if you could do that. Could you take him, all these crew members, the cameras, ask the directors, put us in a time machine and go back to this place and shoot what we're shooting now 65 million years ago. And instead of being lions and buffalo and cheetahs and giraffes, it would be T-Rex and it would be, titanosaurs. So that was the thinking that I had in my head, and I sort of stored that away in my mind and thought about it over the years and started to develop it. But of course, it's all very well having the idea. You've got to have the wherewithal to do it. You've got to have the technology, because you have to, there isn't a time machine. You have to create that effect. And all those stars didn't really align till about 3 or 4 years ago, when I started speaking to somebody who I'd known for years, who actually was the commissioner for that Africa series, who is now the creative director for Apple. And she and I knew each other, and she loved the idea. She said, yes, let's try and do this. And then the really final ingredient was meeting Jon Favreau, who was in her office, who was working on Lion King. And he came in and he was interested in meeting up, and he started talking about some of the things he was doing in Lion King and showing me some footage on it. And he said, by the way, half of this stuff is because we've spent the last year looking at all your programs, how you shoot lions, so we can be inspired to how to make Lion King. So there's immediately a kind of meeting of minds about approach, knowing each other's work, thinking, actually, we could do this. And of course, when you've got that kind of resources, then you can pull off something like this, almost get into that time machine.
It's funny you mentioned that, like the wherewithal. Is there some kind of, I don't know, science that you had to research? Were there updates? Were there some revelations that are like, okay, this is the time we found out what makes the prehistoric world, we know a little more? What was that research like?
Well, exactly. Because when I was talking about this, this the alignment of the stars, there was another part of this which was also building in that little gap, between when I first thought about it and when we finally got going, which made me convinced that this was the right time. And that is that the scientific community were starting to, well, it seemed to me anyway, they were starting to talk about their studies and their interpretations of dinosaurs. And it's not just dinosaurs, it's all the animals that lived in that time. They started to look at it from a much more behavioral perspective. Of course, they're still studying the remains, the bones, the fossils, the footprints, all the tangible evidence. But what they started to do is think about, well, how do these animals actually live? Not just what did they look like, but what were their lives like? What was the ecology they lived in? How did they interact with each other? Partly, they said, inspired by, interestingly, watching, again, our natural history programs. So suddenly you had scientific underpinning to be able to tell the types of stories that I wanted to tell, which is effectively making a planet Earth but 66 million years ago. And you, if you know those shows, you know the sort of the grammar and the style and the approach to telling those stories. And I wanted to be able to reflect that in this series. And it's only by that, that sort of scientific backing that we could do it.
You have this idea, it's a great idea. You, Sir David, on a mountaintop, and you're thinking about it. It's great. Take it in Apple and they love it. It's great. When you take this idea and you're like, yeah, we're going to go back 65 million years to, your cinematography team, your sound people, and you're like, we're going to do this thing. What's the reaction? What are the thought processes? And what was it like internally with like your group? Like, hey, we're going to do this. It's really ambitious. Or they're like, how are we going to make this happen?
Well, that's exactly the how is this series is like two icebergs. There's an iceberg of science. So what you see in the programs is this tiny little tip that we show, but it's underpinned by this massive, great pyramid or iceberg of knowledge. And the same with the realization. When you see these animals come to life on the screen, what you're seeing is again a tip of a pyramid, of an iceberg of incredible complexity, which I to this day don't and never will understand how these artists and how these technicians do this with computer code. And marrying those together was one of the really interesting challenges, because it's another little pyramid or triangle. It's the science, the technology, and the kind of artistry, storytelling. All of those three things have to meet each other to create this, I hope, utterly authentic experience, as if you were really there watching these animals doing what they're doing.
Would you say, in terms of process for you guys, was there any step, you've done so many of these, that it's like, was there any shift that you're like, oh, this is completely different, I need to change my approach? Or
well, I think yes and no. I mean, the interesting thing is one of the things that, and one of the reasons why I think this is a very good marriage with Apple is I've tried always to be innovative, not just do what I've done that. You could do another one the same, but I've always thought to myself, well, I've done that. What's the next iteration of that? And this felt like a really, in some ways, it is taking the grammar, the genre down the same track, but it's also a bit of a jump into a parallel track, because you're having to work in a world that doesn't exist anymore, and you've got nothing to really film. So that requires a bit of an interesting mindset. But I think the thing that really got all of us excited was when we started to talk about the approach of how we were going to make it. We kept pulling back or stepping back to what are the rules of if we were really doing it. What kind of camera would we use? What lens would we use? Where would we put the camera? Would we be in a hide? Would we be in a drone? Would we be shooting this using underwater housing? And all that sort of knowledge and approach that we have when we're applying it to real animals, when you can then apply that as a framework for when you're doing it through CG animals, has really been has been one fascinating, but also I think that's the difference between this project and almost anything else that's ever been done in this area, because I think it really is the first time it's really been done by wildlife filmmakers. And that's certainly what John's he's so generous in this, because he's a genius, and he brings so much to this. But what he says is, I've learned, one of the reasons why I love working on this is I learned so much. And what he's learning, he says, is that approach, the grammar, the how we operate. And what we did was we deliberately imposed constraints onto what we were doing, because obviously in a virtual world with CGI, you can put a camera anywhere. You can do anything. You could put a camera under a T-Rex's nose if you wanted to, but no cameraman or camerawoman on God's earth would ever do that for real, because they get eaten. So you can't do that shot. And those sorts of rules. So we've said, you've only got one camera when you're on location, because that's what we have in the real world. You can only move around a little bit because you'll disturb the animals. So do you see what I mean? You start to apply that sort of grammar and that sort of approach, and that brings this amazing, I think, authenticity. And that was what we were going for just John and us. absolute sense of authenticity.
Now, this is getting a bit into the weeds of the program because I was impressed mentioning the specifics of that and thinking about how you want to approach the filmmaking itself and keeping it true to wildlife filmmaking. Are, are the environments also CG? I didn't know if it was a composite thing where we're going to shoot these environments and pull them together and we're going to create the animals themselves, because it was just so vivid. I was
That's
couldn't
a good
really
question.
tell.
I mean, I'm glad you're asking that, because that makes me think we must have pulled this off well. Because if if you're asking that question, no, the environments are largely real, and one of the reasons why we chose what's called the Maastrichtian, which is this last period, that basically the last days of the dinosaurs, which is 66. It's a sort of a period of about 3 million years, right at the end of their before the big meteor hit. Partly because that's when the coolest dinosaurs are around. That's when you've got your T-Rex and you've got your Triceratops and the like, but also because it's the closest to today. And so some of the environment, some of the landscapes, the trees, the plants, the other animals that are around are more like they are today. So we could find avatar environments on planet Earth today that work for the environments we needed to do then. Because of course, one of the things that I hope is surprising about watching a series is how widespread these creatures were. They lived everywhere. They didn't, you tend to think of them living in sort of hot, deserty things or in deep jungles. They lived on plains, they lived in up in the poles, in the oceans. So we needed to find a broad range of habitats and backdrops, if you like, for them. But in the end, we decided that Mother Nature is still a very, very, very good CGI artist. It's hard to beat her when it comes to some of the nuances and subtlety. So if she's done the work for you, let's go and film it. So we did a lot of filming in the real world, and then there's lots of technology where you take little, silver balls and color charts, and so you can match the light and the color and all the rest of it. So you can put we do LiDAR scanning, and so we have a creation of the environment in the computer as well, which mimics the real environment, so that when it comes to putting the animals into that environment, it's hopefully seamless. So you feel they're really in that world.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's very complicated. It's something that I still watch these guys do it, and I just think it's like a magic trick. They sort of go, oh, abracadabra, and it happens. It's quite remarkable, actually.
One of the funny things about this that you mentioned, well, not being like other nature programs, but one thing that it is like other nature programs is that you have this, animal narrative, what they're doing, their behaviors and whatnot. With all this new research and these things that you're finding out about prehistoric worlds and dinosaurs and whatnot, was there things that you're like, we have to show X about dinosaurs, we have to show this sort of behavior or environment, and this is really interesting. I didn't know that X long-necked dinosaur behaved in this fashion. Were there things that you felt had to be core to this viewing experience?
Well, I think yes, there are some specifics, but also in general, it was this idea that there's a real complexity to their lives. We were right from the beginning. I said, these are not monsters. They are complex individual animals. So they all have, like today, all animals have their own individual challenges and struggles and individual outcomes to their lives. So we wanted to replicate that. And also that there were a lot of them. This world was incredibly rich. It was much, much richer than it is today. So we wanted to give that sense. But also, I suppose that the sophistication of their behavior, I think, was an important part. So, for example, with T-Rex, you could do T-Rex all jaws and claws, and of course they were super hunters, or super predators. But there's much more to their lives, and I think when I've done these shows over the years, I think the audience get quite tired of predation sequences the whole time.
I found the herd of T-Rex to be very interesting and engaging. It's they're hanging out and they're swimming and these things. It was amazing.
And when there's that courtship behavior, there's a sequence where the male and the female do that courtship, And the deduction to that is that they've discovered they have these incredibly sensitive nerve endings on their faces, and also they have these little sort of nibble marks, bite marks on their faces. And we know from watching contemporary animals that that often is related to nuzzling behavior, and during courtship a lot of animals do that sort of little bit of, they bite, and it's non-lethal biting, it's a technical phrase, or non-aggressive biting. So we felt that was they found these scars and the like. So you start to pull these threads of what's the evidence. We've got the paleontological evidence, we've got the behavioral evidence, we've got what they call phylogenetic bracketing. So you say, what is this animal's relations with other animals, and what do they do? And so, rather like Sherlock Holmes takes all these strands of evidence and pulls them together, and in the end he doesn't know what happened, but you weave them together, and it can only really ever go together one way. The picture's not perfect, but it's a pretty good picture, so you can say we're pretty sure that's what happened. Yeah, the other thing, there's some really weird things that I love. For example, the elasmosaur babies that eat that, well, all of the elasmosaurs that pick up those huge stones and swallow them back to sort of ballast to keep them, but also they use it to grind up their food. And the young ones can't eat the really big stones, so they have to go and eat little stones first before they're big enough, and then as they get older they'll eat bigger stones. And they found these stones. They found the stones that are inside these elasmosaurs in a particular location, which is it's only very specific, but it's nowhere near where they found the elasmosaur skeletons, which had these stones in it. So we know they must have migrated to this location to go and get these stones. So it's amazing, like forensic science. You're peering through a slightly foggy room. There's been a murder here, and where's all the evidence? And you start to put it together, and then it was the butler.
It's a great analogy. It all does feel like there's a sense of mystery and like wonder with the animals. I mean, this is kind of a two-parter, but I want your opinion on this, but also what do you think audiences will take away from the sense of wonder about these animals that we've only so recently began to find research and know about? Did you go into it and being like, hey, I just have to tell the Tyrannosaurus, the Triceratops story? And what do you think people will be most excited to see?
Well, it'll be lovely to get start to get some more detailed feedback. I mean, the initial feedback we had was surprise, which is always, as a filmmaker, that's a great reaction, that people, because you don't want people to think, oh, I've seen all this. They felt surprised at what they saw. And I think they were, as you said, there was a sense of wonder. But I also think as a documentary maker, you of course you want to do those three things. You want to inform people, you want to educate people, and you want to entertain people. But that sense of education, that sense of revealing to people something extraordinary, I think has been a really, really, really rewarding, because I think I think what we've done is we've sort of established a kind of the representation of dinosaurs for the 21st century. If you go back in time, when they were first discovered, people thought they were dragons, and then they realized they were reptilian animals, and then they realized they were actually a particular type of dinosaurs, and they started to work out a bit more about their range. And then there was the discovery they were warm-blooded. These moments in time when the general public have started to reposition their understanding of this world. And I hope what we've done here is we've done that again for the 21st century. You look at this and you now know they were feathered. They were complex. They didn't just live lone lives of, jaws and claws predators. There was complexity. There was parental care. All these things that I think make people realize, because there's something absolutely always enticing about dinosaurs, but a little bit of the mystery of their world. But people want to have a little bit of that mystery uncovered, and I think and hope that's what we've done. Also, I hope they feel like Sir David said when we finally when we did the narrations. He was in the the narration booth, and we'd finished that sequence we're just talking about with the show where the two tyrannosaurs are mating, and he sort of took his headphones off and he sort of rearranged his glasses and got me wobbled. He said, "Do you know, it was like watching them through a pair of binoculars. It was as if I was there. It was absolutely extraordinary." Now, that is somebody who's seen every single thing there is to see in the natural world. And for him to feel that engaged with it, I just thought, well, if you can't get much better than that.
Let's talk about our friend there and in the back a bit. You know, the spark is there at the beginning with him. You tell him that idea. And then when you come back to David and say, hey, this thing is happening, what is that scripting process like? Had he done something that was, I guess, that he's seen it all, but was this new for him as well? What was that process like for him?
Well, yes, I think, I mean, he is a very knowledgeable paleontologist. I mean, he's always been fascinated by fossils and dinosaurs. He's got, you know, in his house, he's got dinosaur footprints and all sorts of stuff hidden away in boxes all over the place. It's like in Aladdin's cave. And because of that combination of his deep knowledge, but also his ethos, which is this sense of accuracy, authenticity. You know, so I don't know if you have it in the States, we have this thing called the kite mark, which means, you know that if it has a kite mark, it's absolutely true and right. And so, you know, he can do he can work on any project he likes. So, you know, for him to want to do this and to be engaged with this, you know, is a great testament to, I think, how, you know, that he feels it is of that quality. It justifies his involvement in it. It's a sort of circular process in some ways, I suppose. But of course, his voice being added to it is extra ingredient in that sense of that authenticity and the grammar of a natural history show. When, you know, if it's a David Attenborough narrated natural history show, if it's a big one, you know, it's kind of the last word. It is the sort of definitive statement. And I wanted that sense of that. And he's a brilliant writer and obviously a brilliant storyteller. And he really, really enjoyed working on it. And because, of course, he won't have seen any of this before. So every week we'd send him or every couple of weeks, we'd send him a new program with the script that we'd written, and he would then write his version. And he'd do it, and then he'd say, great, when's the next one coming? You know, he was so excited about getting the next one, because he said, oh, I've just seen that XYZ. I've never seen it represented like this, but of course, yes, that makes sense. Yes, it's wonderful. And he loved all the representation of the feathered velociraptors and the Mononychus, because, you know, all the scientific community know this is the truth, but it's been quite hard to get that through into sort of popular understanding of it, because everybody, you know, people think they're going to look like a little sort of chicken, but they're not. They're much more impressive than that. They're still incredibly cool animals, and he was very pleased about that, definitely. In fact, he does a little explainer at the end of each, I don't know if you've seen, but at the end of each episode, we take one element of the story and we do a little sort of dissection of how we understand and how we know it. And one of those is about the feathered dinosaurs.
Well, I mean, one thing that I was really curious about too, in the whole growing of the world and the selection of these places and where these things go and why do you want to develop these particular episodes, was the ocean episode. And we already talked about mystery and building things out, and that's something that we have such limited grasp now. Yeah. But that episode was so impressive to me, especially the one to begin off with. Can you talk about putting that one together? I mean,
well, so the reason why we chose that episode for a couple of reasons. First of all, the coastal areas in the contemporary world is something very interesting about where land meets sea, because you've got these two worlds colliding, and the combination of that creates all sorts of opportunities for animals. So you often get really interesting and unusual behavior, and you also get quite a lot of drama in that world, because it's quite a dangerous place for animals to live. It can be very rewarding, but it can also be quite dangerous. So we felt that was a good place, and so it shows in that episode. Also, it allowed us to, in the first episode, introduce both the sort of the three groups of superstars in the series: the dinosaurs, the marine reptiles, which are not dinosaurs, but they're, you know, they lived alongside, and also the flying reptiles, which are also not dinosaurs, but lived alongside. So you have the pterosaurs, which was the flying reptiles, the mosasaurs and the elasmosaurs, marine reptiles, and you had your T-Rex superstar as your terrestrial, you know, true dinosaur. So it allowed us in the first show to take all, you know, to get all our players on the pitch, so to speak, but also they're all very surprising because those environments and that, as I was saying earlier, these are very high stakes environments. It meant that the stories inevitably would be quite dramatic and quite gripping and surprising. So I think that was the kind of thinking. And we just got lucky that some of the scientific discoveries that came out just allowed us to deliver some really cutting edge stuff, because quite a lot of things that we show in this show haven't even been published yet, because we have this brilliant scientific team, and we have one particular scientific advisor who's our main advisor, who is like a multi armed octopus who has contacts in every area of this field, and all the scientists who are working on this, you know, let him know about what they're working on, so we get to hear about these things early. And you know, 10 years ago on that mountain, some of the things that we're in this series weren't even discovered, and certainly not described. And even in the last 3 years, things have appeared that have only just are completely new to science, and their interpretations are new to science as well.
Well, I mean, this is my last question, and you mentioned always looking for what's the next thing and being innovative. I mean, we've already gone 65 million years in the past, Mike. I don't know what are we gonna see next? Like, what
well, I probably can't say too much, but you can probably imagine that I'm not on a mountainside thinking about this, but I am thinking about exactly that. Where are the other times in Earth's history when animals put on the greatest show? And there are some other times, and I'm certainly putting my attention, and my colleagues too, about thinking about where we take this time machine next. And I think it will be just as exciting. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Well, thank everybody for listening to Spring Showcase. Thank you, Mike, for joining us once again here at Doc NYC. And please, everyone, enjoy Prehistoric Planet.
Thank you. It was great to talk to you.